King Charles has set the stage for one of the most dramatic royal shakeups in recent memory. He declared a decision that has stunned both the palace and the public. In an unprecedented move, he stripped Camilla of her Queen Consort title, rewriting the rules of succession and sparking intense debate across the world. This shocking announcement left royal insiders scrambling and observers questioning what comes next for a monarchy's fragile unity. Could this be the turning point in royal history? Stay tuned for the full story. Charles strips. Guards locked the corridors. Phones were confiscated. Those who entered the chamber immediately sensed that this was no ordinary gathering. It was the kind of moment that could rewrite royal history. Within hours, King Charles III delivered the words that would stun his family, his nation, and the world. Camilla would no longer hold the title of Queen Consort. The announcement hit like a thunderclap. Yet, for insiders, the decision had been quietly brewing for months. Behind the glittering facade of royal life, tensions had been swelling, whispers of political scheming, questions of loyalty, and claims that Camilla was pushing an agenda clashing with the very heart of the crown to the outside world. The monarchy carried on with its usual pageantry, but behind those gilded doors, pressure was mounting and something had to break. Those summoned to the emergency meeting included Princess Anne, Prince William, figures whose voices carry extraordinary weight in matters of succession and royal duty. They entered a hidden chamber deep inside the palace, space rarely used except for affairs so sensitive they almost never reach public memory. The atmosphere inside was suffocating. Senior advisors shifted nervously, while others were stripped of their positions before the meeting was even halfway through. One aide later confessed under strict anonymity that the sudden dismissals felt like a purge swift, chilling, and irreversible. Then Camilla arrived. Witnesses remember her walking toward the chamber with remarkable composure, chin raised and expression unreadable. For decades, she had endured relentless scrutiny. From public outrage in the 1990s to the cold stares that followed her into marriage with Charles, she had mastered the art of appearing untouchable. Many assumed she carried that same resilience into this gathering, believing whatever storm awaited would be weathered alongside her husband. But the decision was unlike anything she or anyone else expected. Without warning, Charles announced the removal of her crown's highest title. There was no ceremony, no suggestion of a temporary adjustment. It was final. The words echoed through the chamber like a decree from another age, leaving even seasoned palace officials struggling to process what they had heard. I have to admit, in the end, I ended up probably being a sort of pony-mad child. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by hurried whispers that swept the room like wildfire. To some, the moment felt less like a family confrontation and more like a constitutional turning point. This wasn't scandal as usual, it was darker, something that fractured the House of Windsor at its core. Even those hardened by years of palace drama admitted privately that they had never seen anything like it. Beyond the locked doors, word of the king's decision leaked almost instantly. By the time the first reports reached the public, shockwaves were already racing across the Commonwealth. Commentators called it the most significant crisis since the tragic loss of Diana in 1997. For many, the parallels were impossible to ignore at another moment where the monarchy seemed caught in a storm of its own making. What was clear, however, was that this was not a decision made in haste. It was the culmination of long-brewing tensions, bitter disputes, and a king who finally chose to act. Inside Buckingham Palace, the fallout was only beginning. The question on everyone's mind: how far would the ripple effects of this historic move spread? So don't blink, you'll want to know how far this storm reaches. The night Charles ended Camilla's reign, the chamber was suffocating not from noise, but from silence. Every face around the long, polished table looked carved from stone, drained of warmth, drained of allegiance. It was not a council of equals, nor a family gathering. It was a tribunal. What Camilla did not know as she entered with her usual composure was that her fate had already been sealed long before she arrived. Charles was the first to shatter the silence. Those present described his hands trembling not from weakness, but from the sheer intensity of what was about to unfold. His voice carried no hesitation. It cut through the air, sharp and commanding, unlike anything his advisors or family had heard before. There were no pleasantries, no ceremony. He had come with a single purpose, and every word struck with finality. He reminded them that the monarchy was more than crowns, and titles. It was a bond of duty and loyalty, a sacred thread tying sovereign to people. That bond, he declared, had been threatened. Then his eyes fell on Camilla, the words Queen Consort. "I've been actually trying to keep quiet about reaching 3/4 of a century." Left his lips not as an honor but as an accusation, as though the title itself had soured in his mouth. What followed was explosive, his tone laced with fury, his words like indictments in a trial. He spoke of betrayal, of ambitions that cross boundaries no consort should ever cross, of actions that destabilize the trust upon which the crown rests. The accusations built into a storm until his voice thundered with the proclamation that ended the silence forever. The title comes to an end today. The chamber erupted with gasps. Advisors who had sat rigidly still now fidgeted nervously, eyes cast downward, too afraid to meet his gaze. In that instant, order dissolved into chaos. For Camilla, the mask of icy calm she had carried inside began to crack. Decades of resilience surviving ridicule, clawing her way toward legitimacy, collapsed all at once. Her face drained of color, her eyes widened in disbelief. The crown she had fought so long to hold had been ripped away with a single sentence. Yet Charles's words were not the only ones that cut her down. Everything that nature provides, and also not understanding or having been somehow trained to believe. Princess Anne sat with the steely composure of someone who had lived her entire life under the shadow of unyielding duty. At last, she spoke. Her voice was steady, almost eerily calm, yet it carried a weight that left no room for rebuttal. She fixed her gaze on Camilla and delivered just 2 words. "It's time." No speech, no elaboration, simply a dismissal that rang louder than any lengthy condemnation. Prince William's silence, meanwhile, was just as powerful. He said nothing, but his clenched jaw and piercing stare revealed exactly where he stood. His presence beside his father was more than symbolic. It was confirmation that the heir aligned firmly with the king's decision. To those watching, it signaled unity at the highest level of the monarchy, a wall of resolve against Camilla's position. By the end of the meeting, the room carried no whispers, only the roar of inevitability. The icy silence had given way to a storm of murmurs. The weight of history pressing against the chamber walls, sources later revealed that intelligence files and confidential memos had been circulating for months, documenting Camilla's alleged overreach. Reports suggested a pattern of behavior far beyond the accepted role of a consort. To Charles, these dossiers were not speculation but proof evidence of ambition that threatened to undermine both crown and country. What had begun as a meeting cloaked in secrecy turned into a royal reckoning. Charles had spoken, and with those words, the course of Camilla's royal standing changed forever. At first, her influence seemed harmless. No one paid much attention when Camilla began lingering in conversations meant for the king alone. A question slipped in here, an observation there. It was easy to dismiss as natural curiosity. Yet those small interruptions grew into full arguments, her voice carrying into rooms where tradition demanded silence. Palace staff, long schooled in discretion, began to exchange wary glances, sensing that something more than companionship was unfolding. At the monarch's side, the whispers that followed were not about gowns or garden parties, but about influence. Patronages that once appeared routine began to align too neatly with personal interests. Her unusually active hand in shaping foreign visits raised eyebrows. The rumors grew darker when it was said she attended private gatherings with senior politicians and London's most powerful figures, meetings stripped of ceremonial polish. Insiders claimed these encounters were never recorded in schedules, and even the king did not seem fully aware of their scope. What unsettled many was not merely that these meetings occurred, but what they implied: whispered bargains, private negotiations, and unspoken promises of royal access. If true, such dealings blurred the monarchy's most sacred boundary, a line drawn over centuries to keep the crown above politics rather than drowning in it. Former aides described a shift in her demeanor from supportive partner to something closer to corollary. She reportedly analyzed government policies, critiqued strategies, and pressed her views into discussions traditionally reserved for the sovereign. The change, they insisted, was striking an evolution from companion to contender for authority. Dr. Alistair Finch, one of Britain's most respected constitutional historians, described the danger with sobering clarity. The monarchy, he explained, survived precisely because it stood outside the brutal theater of politics. The moment a royal, especially one unelected and bound only by ceremony, appeared to meddle in governance, the institution's legitimacy trembled. Even rumors alone, he warned, could damage the crown in ways no scandal of personal conduct ever could. The whispers no longer felt harmless. They gathered weight, echoing through corridors like thunder before a storm. Carrying a single question: how much power had shifted into the consort's hands? Keep watching to find out. Charles had long grown used to palace gossip, the endless swirl of rumors that followed the monarchy everywhere. Yet these whispers were heavier, harder to dismiss. Advisors began pulling threads together, and soon a troubling pattern emerged. Camilla was no longer spoken of as a supportive consort, but as someone quietly reshaping the monarchy itself. The suggestion that power was being exercised in her shadow filled the king with dread. This unease was not just politics. It was personal cutting to the heart of the crown. Charles had waited decades for the throne, only to face the possibility that its foundations were being undermined by the woman closest to him. And always haunting the matter was the specter of Diana. For the public, Diana had never truly left. Her death in 1997 froze her in the nation's heart as the eternal people's princess warm. Open, untouchable in legacy. Camilla, by contrast, carried the label of outsider. The woman who intruded on a story that belonged to someone else. No matter how many years passed, the comparison lingered. Each rumor tied to her reignited old wounds. To the king, this was a storm without escape. Every revelation of Camilla's alleged overreach dragged with it the reminder that Diana's shadow still loomed large over the monarchy, shaping public opinion as powerfully as any royal proclamation. Jamie, he loves his koala bear. He's got. The nation had crowned Charles, but in the hearts of millions, Diana's presence remained the truer symbol of royalty. Against that enduring legacy, Camilla's place seemed fragile. The monarchy itself stood exposed to doubts that cut deeper than politics. These doubts struck at trust, history, and the very survival of the crown. It was, in many ways, a crown divided. Charles has shocked the monarchy with a move no one thought possible. In a stunning twist that has left courtiers unsettled and the public divided, is declared a palace showdown by stripping Camilla of the Queen Consort title. This decision, as dramatic as it is, unprecedented, has turned the royal household into the center of global attention. The gravity of this choice stretches far beyond ceremonial titles. It signals a profound shift in power and intention, reshaping the monarchy's future in ways few could have imagined. The announcement came like a lightning strike. Piercing through the careful calm, the palace so often tries to project Camilla, who for years had worked tirelessly to earn acceptance after a controversial entry into royal life, suddenly found herself at the center of a storm she could not control. Her public role, once secured by the late Queen Elizabeth II's blessing, was stripped away in a single command from her husband, sending shockwaves across the United Kingdom and beyond. For decades, her journey had been one of reinvention. From the shadows of scandal to the spotlight of royal duty, she weathered criticism and carved out a space as Charles's steadfast partner. Too many. Her elevation to Queen Consort last year represented a final chapter of redemption. A sign the royal family had moved beyond old wounds. But now, that chapter has been torn from the story, replaced with uncertainty and whispers of palace rivalries threatening the fragile unity of the crown. Observers are left questioning Charles's true motives. Was this a calculated move to reinforce his authority amid growing pressures from inside and outside the monarchy? Or was it a personal reckoning, one that reopened old wounds and exposed the deep tension between tradition, duty, and loyalty? What is clear is that such a move risks reigniting public divides and reshaping the balance of power within the royal household. Around the world, reactions are pouring in. Some hail the king's boldness. Others criticize the instability it may bring, with the monarchy already under scrutiny. The fallout from this decision could define Charles's reign for years to come. Palace corridors have rarely echoed with such tension, and every glance, whisper, appearance now carries the weight of this historic shift. Inside this turmoil, the voices closest to Charles became decisive. Princess Anne, known for her blunt honesty, did not soften her words when duty to the crown was at stake. In hushed but unwavering tones, she reminded her brother of a truth no monarch could ignore. The throne existed for the people, not personal comfort. It was a reminder Charles could not easily dismiss, for it pierced the very heart of his dilemma. Yet the counsel that carried the heaviest weight came not from seasoned courtiers or advisers, but from his own son. Prince William, steady and deliberate, spoke to his father away from the public gaze. He did not veil his concern with courtesy. Instead, he pressed a point that cut deeper than politics: the monarchies. Survival was inseparable from the memory of Diana. To disregard that bond, he warned, was to gamble with the very foundation of the institution itself. Diana's image had grown larger than life since her passing, woven into the identity of modern royalty. Her warmth, her compassion, her connection with ordinary people had not faded with time. They had become the standard by which every royal was measured. William understood this better than anyone, for he carried both her legacy and the weight of the future crown. He made it clear that defending Camilla's contested role risked alienating the very generation that still revered his mother. Anne's pragmatism and William's urgency converged into an unmistakable message. The monarchy could not afford sentiment when its stability was at stake. For Charles, it was not only the voice of a sister urging duty, nor a son appealing to history, but a tightening circle of truth that left little room to maneuver. Inside the gilded halls of Buckingham Palace, silence often hides the deepest storms. That silence was shattered when King Charles was handed a confidential dossier's contents, so alarming that they threatened to unravel the crown itself. The file, assembled in secret by senior aides, carried whispers of a carefully constructed plan. One that accused Camilla of working to weave her own bloodline into the monarchy's foundations. This was no ordinary palace intrigue. It read like the blueprint of a dynasty designed to rival the Windsors. The dossier, according to sources, contained a mosaic of evidence: private correspondence, sensitive financial documents, and testimonies from trusted members of the royal household. Together, they painted the picture of a Queen Consort whose ambitions extended far beyond ceremonial duty. At the heart of it were her children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes. The revelation suggested she had lobbied behind the scenes for Tom to gain discreet influence over select royal estates, and for Laura to receive ceremonial honors that would elevate her status almost to the level of the king's own nieces. What appeared in routine paperwork sent for Charles's signature mundane, approvals buried in the flood of state documents, was said to be the careful layering of measures that, once complete, could secure her family's future inside the institution forever. When the documents finally reached Prince William, his reaction was nothing short of explosive. To him, this was not simply about influence, titles, or protocol. It was an attempt to erase the memory of his mother. Diana's legacy had long been bound to the survival of the monarchy itself, and William could not tolerate any challenge to it. Reports described him confronting his father with raw fury, accusing Camilla of betrayal on a scale that endangered not only the crown, but the unity of the royal family itself. His outrage ignited a rare moment of solidarity inside the palace. Old rivalries and divisions suddenly fell silent, replaced by a recognition that something greater was at risk. For the first time in years, the family stood united, not merely in defense of tradition, but against the specter of a rival dynasty rising within their own walls. For Charles, the pressure became unbearable. The matter could no longer be dismissed as a private quarrel between his wife and the institution. It had hardened into a stark choice: safeguard the monarchy's survival, or allow Camilla's ambitions to grow unchecked. Ironically, he had tried to remain quiet about reaching 3/4 of a century in age. But now his decision could no longer be hidden. Once his choice became known, the illusion of stability collapsed. Camilla, once central to the daily rhythms of the crown, was suddenly isolated. Sources described her heartbreak, her disbelief that after decades of loyalty and sacrifice, she would face such a public and devastating reversal. It was an outcome she had never imagined possible. But was Charles truly protecting the monarchy, or was he tearing open wounds the institution could never heal? Beyond the gates of Buckingham Palace, the kingdom itself was divided. The king's decision, meant to steady the monarchy, instead unleashed a storm unlike any seen in recent memory. Crowds filled public squares as social media erupted in furious debate. Supporters of Diana, their devotion unshaken even decades after her death, hailed the move as long-awaited justice. One viral post captured the mood: "The true queen has finally been avenged." To them, Camilla's fall was not tragedy, but reckoning, the closing of a chapter that had haunted the crown since the 1990s, yet where Diana's admirers celebrated. Camilla's defenders raged. Smaller in number, but no less passionate, they branded the decision a betrayal. They accused Charles of sacrificing his wife to preserve a faltering reign. To them, he was not a man of courage, but of cowardice buckling under the weight of public opinion. The contrast was sharp, one side jubilant, the other seething. The press wasted no time fueling the frenzy. Morning headlines screamed, "Queen no more." Television networks replayed the same images on an endless loop, while panels of historians and royal commentators debated every word, dissected every gesture, and filled the airwaves with speculation. A war of narratives erupted. Diana's legacy, brighter than ever, clashed against Camilla's downfall, framed by some as long overdue justice, by others as political execution. And at the center stood Charles, lonelier than at any moment in his reign. To some, he showed resolve, a monarch willing to make painful choices to safeguard the crown. To others, he looked pitiable, frail, indecisive, and betraying the woman who had stood beside him for decades. The crown he had defended all his life now weighed heavier than ever, its burden impossible to lighten. Meanwhile, the Prince and Princess of Wales emerged unscathed. Their silence became their shield, transforming scandal into strength. William and Catherine did not need words. Their composure alone reassured the public. Where Camilla faltered, they held steady. Where Charles appeared fractured, they looked whole. For many, it felt like a quiet coronation, the moment the nation's heart shifted fully toward the next generation. In them, Diana's spirit seemed to live on, reshaping the monarchy into something more modern, more resilient, inside the palace. An unprecedented task had begun: the erasure of a Queen Consort. There was no handbook, no royal protocol for dismantling a royal identity. Yet, in the unforgiving glare of history, it unfolded step by step. The question lingered: how do you erase a queen in full view of the world? And what secrets vanish with her? The vanishing of a queen unfolded almost like theater. Only hours before the decree, Camilla had stepped onto the Buckingham Palace balcony. Dressed in full regalia, standing proudly beside the king, she looked every inch the queen. Yet the silence that met her was chilling. The crowd did not cheer. They watched in uneasy quiet. Her smile faltered, her hand lifted in a hesitant wave. And in that instant, the grandeur of monarchy felt less like permanence and more like farewell. None knew it then, but it was her final appearance as queen. Behind palace walls, events moved with the precision of ritual undoing. Staff worked swiftly yet discreetly, as if cleansing the monarchy of a presence it no longer wished to acknowledge. Portraits once unveiled with pomp were quietly taken down and placed into storage alongside disgraced figures of the past. Official websites were updated in silence. Her name struck through as if it had never been there at all. Even her personal cipher CR, Camilla Regina, meant to be engraved upon documents and seals, was erased as though it were a stain. The order bore the king's trembling signature, but its weight was staggering. Was this truly an act of necessity, or a dangerous overreach in a modern constitutional age? Legal scholars scrambled for answers. Dr. Finch noted there was no precedent. Never before had a sovereign stripped his spouse of a title conferred at accession. Legally, Camilla remained his wife. Symbolically and constitutionally, she had been erased. The contradiction left the nation uneasy, wondering if the monarchy had crossed into uncharted waters. This was more than the removal of a crown. It was the careful construction of a symbolic death. An identity once celebrated was now treated as contamination, scrubbed away in cold, methodical silence. It looked less like reform than exorcism, the monarchy purging her image from its core. Yet even as the process unfolded, the larger question remained. Was this an attempt to preserve the throne, or a desperate act exposing its fragility? By erasing one queen, the monarchy itself seemed to crack. Fissures spreading through the family and the kingdom alike, Camilla's place in history now lingers in suspension. Not erased entirely, but transformed into a haunting reminder of how power can be bestowed and just as easily taken away. So what do you think? Was the vanishing of the queen a bold stroke to protect the crown, or a dangerous step into uncharted territory? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe